Good morning and welcome to my channel, The Fruitcake Astrologer, where I will give you an astrologer's take on current events and people in the news. So, winter for the United States. Let's look forward past the elections and see what's in store for the United States. This would be from about Christmas 2020 to about the third week in March of 2021. Okay, now if you enjoy these readings, I hope you will like, share, and subscribe, and you can find me on these other social media platforms as well. So, for those of you who follow my channel, you know that I came out and I believe a war will be breaking out in Asia in 2021, early 2021, probably after about mid-January. But it does not look like that war will bleed over into the United States during this 3-month period. Now, this is a mundane astrology reading. And what that is world astrology. And it's for when the sun enters one of the cardinal signs, in this case the sign of Capricorn, coincides with what we would call the winter solstice. Every country is going to have very similar planetary placements. What's going to change, because I'm setting them for different capitals around the world, like I set it for Beijing, China, and this one I set for Washington, D.C., you'll notice the houses will move around. Okay, so where the energy is playing out might be different in different countries. But every country is going to deal with this. And as I mentioned in my China reading, a very fascinating study for those of you is to look at the ingress chart. This is what they're called when the sun ingresses or enters one of the cardinal signs. The one back in World War II where FDR, Mussolini, and Hitler all died. So the energy plays out on a world basis. Okay, now for those of you who aren't interested in astro speak, I get it. You know, here I am going to just put bullet point highlights. If you want to see where I got that from, if you want to hear the rationale behind this, feel free to listen. Now, I listed a whole bunch of stuff under the 4th house because we have Neptune conjunct the moon in the 4th house. And I sat there for a long time and thought, how could this play out? How might this play out? And it could play out in a lot of different ways. You know, astrologers get symbols. You know, Neptune rules the COVID. It rules water, oceans. It rules the movie theaters, deceit, deception, illusion, lies. You know, which one is it? I looked for clues in the grid, looked down, and you see there are very few clues given by the aspects for Neptune. So I realized I kind of covered the bases there, but I don't know how it will play out. Sometimes it's one way, sometimes it's many ways, and only God can tell you that. Maybe I sound a little alarmist, but if I were you, I'd have a little extra food and medicine around the house. This looks to be an exceptionally eventful period for not just the United States, but the world, okay? Because we have 3 planets at the 0 degree. Now, I was trained in mundane astrology that anything at the 0 degrees, the same degree as the sun, means an eventful period. And we don't have just 1, we have 3. Wow. It looks to be a hugely eventful period for the world. Now, how it's going to play out, like I said, I get symbols. I can't always predict things 100%. In fact, a good astrologer is 70 to 90% accurate, but that means we astrologers are wrong about 10 to 30% of the time. We misinterpret. We bring our personal prejudices to the table. We bring the glasses that we wear looking out on the world from our life experiences, and we're wrong sometimes. So I do see an eventful period. That I cannot argue with. How it will play out, I can't always predict, but it looks like disruptions of the homeland. The reason I say that is because that Neptune conjunct the moon being the people, in the 4th house, one of the angular houses, things happen in the angular houses, you know, it's kind of like, wonder how that could play out. Now, it's also trained that things at the 0 degrees tend to disrupt and reorganize. And look, we have Mercury, Jupiter, and Saturn all at 0 degrees. Now Mercury rules the midheaven, leadership, The leadership of the country. Is there going to be reorganization of the leadership of the country? Now, look at Jupiter. Jupiter rules the second house. That's financial reorganizations. Like, does that mean the banks are going to get reorganized? And Saturn. Saturn rules the third house of communications. Notice that the moon rules the ninth house of publishing, the Department of Justice, politics. So we are getting a read that there are going to be significant reorganizations and disruptions in the United States. Now, many people are watching the Biden scandal. I know that Twitter and Facebook, the big tech companies, have censored this, which, is pretty clearly a violation of the First Amendment of free speech. The New York Post is the fourth largest newspaper in the country and arguably quite liberal. So for them to ban that story is something I've never seen in my lifetime. I've never seen I've never seen the dissolution of our freedom of speech. So I wonder if there will be reckonings coming for that. So notice that Neptune conjuncts the moon. And the moon rules the ninth house of the Department of Justice, newspapers, and the internet publishing. Does this mean they are going to be seriously held to account? Does this mean they have been deceiving the people? Neptune conjunct the moon, that will get them reorganized, disrupted because of monopoly status. And I think most Americans would agree they do seem to have a monopoly. And, we'd love to see that they would be using that power for the good. But, of course, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Now, all powerful people are not corrupt, right? We know that. Power can be used for the good of the people. It's the abuse of power that really sets us off. And that, my friends, is a great segue into Pluto square Mars. Now look at Pluto square Mars is exceedingly tight. Mars is less than 1 degree away from squaring Pluto. That is rage. That is murderous rage. People are going to be so angry. And who are they going to be angry at? Well, Pluto in Capricorn, powerful, corrupt leaders, Capricorn, in the second house of money. So, and the fifth house is one of the sexual houses, and Pluto is one of the sexual planets. Mars is also a sexual planet. So we are getting a real big sex read here. There's going to be some bad sexual things regarding powerful, important, potentially corrupt. Pluto rules corruption. Powerful leadership. And it will probably involve money, second house, and it will probably involve sex, and it may involve children. The fifth house rules children. How horrible is this? Now, I do see jail. Why do I say that? Because Pluto rules the 12th house. Now, the 12th house also rules scandals and self-undoing. So these powerful people have undone themselves. When you get drunk with power and you feel like you can get away with anything. Pluto in Capricorn. Capricorn, the sign that holds people responsible, ruled by Saturn, the severe school teacher who comes to, hold your feet to the fire and wrap you on the knuckles when you put a toe out of line. So I do believe there will be accountability and there will be arrests and jail sentences because of Pluto ruling the 12th house. Now, I think people will be watching all this legal stuff and weeping about it because Pleiades, there's something to weep about, rules the 7th house of legal issues, treaties, war. Are we going to be watching war break out in Asia and weeping about it? Now, with the internet, we get to watch everything in the comfort of our living rooms, every blown up building, every murdered it's just terrible. It's right in our living rooms. And I think it's going to make the people Venus is in the first house in Sag. Now, Sag is protection. We're going to feel protected, but we're going to be, crying about this. Now, if there is a war in China, and if I'm correct on that, I do believe the United States will close their borders to refugees. Why do I say that? Because the sun is intercepted in the 9th house of foreign things. I think the United States will not open their borders to refugees, for good or ill. For good or ill, I don't know. Now, if I'm correct about a war in China, what do you think will happen to all the Asian money? Will it flood out of Asia during the war period and probably flood into the more stable economies, such as the United States? Maybe that's part of what fuels the boom in the United States that I'm seeing. So let's talk about this boom in the United States. Good Lord, look at this grand trine between Fortuna, the Sun, Mercury, and Uranus. Now, that is in the earth signs. Those are the ones that represent physical wealth. And if that's not enough for you, it's out of the supply houses themselves. So this is like hugely positive for the United States financially. And if that's not enough for you, we have Jupiter about to conjunct Saturn, which is a 20-year financial cycle, the start of a financial cycle. Now, you'll notice it's going to begin in Aquarius, the sign of tech, brilliance, discoveries, humanitarianism. Will there be some, honking big discoveries going on in the United States during this next 20-year period? It sure looks to me like there will be some technological advances. But you might say in that grand trine is that combust Mercury at 0 degrees, no less. Now, remember I said that's eventful and tends to reorganize. In the 2nd house, does that mean the banking system is going to get an overhaul? Now, the 3rd house is ruled by Mercury. That's its natural house. And you will notice the other 2 planets at 0 degrees, Jupiter and Saturn, are also there. So that hints that there will be a reorganization of communications. Now, this says to me, we could easily see an internet outage during this period. Why do I say that? Because that Mercury is combust, which literally says, I burn up communications. Uranus, of course, is is tech. It's retrograde and trining Fortuna in the 9th house. Now, are things going to get so crazy and ugly that they're going to shut down the internet? That could be an extreme interpretation of this, but it could also mean that the leadership, Sun, is going to shut down the tech companies, right? Uranus is tech, 9th house is communications. Does this mean it's time for Google, Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, to be broken up? And as I record this on October 21st, Google has now got an antitrust lawsuit against them. And they, to me, they have really overstepped their bounds. I've never seen censorship like this before. I mean, from the New York Post, which is a liberal magazine and the 4th largest circulation in the United States. And they are, I'm just like, wow, they really kind of crossed a line on that one. And of course, the more you ban things, the more people are going to want to see it. It becomes the forbidden fruit. Let's go ahead and just roll through the houses. The 1st house rules the people of the country, and it's at the 29 degree of Scorpio. Now, that is the tail of the scorpion, its stinger. So people are going to feel really stung by these scandals, by these powerful people and the stuff that's coming out. Now, the moon also is a ruler of the people in a mundane chart, and it's conjunct Neptune in the 4th house. Are people feeling confused? I could see that. Are people feeling sorrowful? Neptune conjunct the moon is sorrow. Are people feeling, religious? Neptune rules religious. Does this mean another outbreak of the COVID? It could mean that as well. Now, I was looking for hints because usually you can get a hint as to how it's going to manifest, but Neptune has very few aspects. It's just a square, pretty much a square to the node, which means this was all meant to be, and an opposition, kind of a wide opposition to the midheaven. Now, some people would stop counting that, around 5 degrees, but I pick it up. So maybe they're confused about their leadership. Who is my leader? Maybe not feeling terribly confident about my leadership. Okay, this is happening in the 4th house of the home and family, the homeland, real estate, food. Does this mean there are food shortages? Does this mean issues with the water of the United States? I mean, I could really roll through a few things. In fact, I did in my highlights because I don't know how this is going to play out, guys. Does this mean drugs? Neptune. People are feeling confused. Lots of substance abuse in the home. It could mean that as well. If it happens to mean food shortages or a blight on crops or water or the COVID, guys, just, have some extra food and medicine around the house. This looks to be an exceedingly eventful 3-month period, and I can't predict what's going to happen. So just be ready, be prepared. There's nothing wrong with having a little extra food around the house. We just don't really know what's going to happen. Yeah. So just be careful. Just be prepared. Think about your family and yourself. Of course. Now, it could also mean evictions, a mass wave of evictions, right? Because they've been held off for the COVID. But when that lid comes off, there could be mass evictions. And if that's the case, is there someone in your sphere that you can help through a rough period? I thought about it for a significant amount of time. I don't know. Does it mean theaters are going to be dissolved? A whole bunch of theaters. Does it mean Hollywood is going to, go through a dissolution period? I can't tell you, except to say just be a little bit prepared. The 2nd house, wow, this is the start of a huge financial period for the United States. Does this mean all those jobs that we sent overseas are coming back? We found with the COVID that there's a lot of things we don't make in the United States, including drugs. A lot of our drugs are made overseas, and if there is a pandemic, what are we going to do? We don't make antibiotics. I don't believe we make antibiotics here in the United States anymore. So to me, this may be the start of a huge financial boom as these jobs and industries come flooding back into the United States. Now, 3rd house, wow. 2 of the 3 planets at 0 degrees are in our 3rd house, kind of on the cusp between the 2nd and 3rd house. Now, all planets have phasal relationships, not just the moon. We look at the new moon and, the disseminating phase and all that, but all planets have phasal relationships, including Jupiter and Saturn. And these are the financial planets, the business planet. Jupiter expands, Saturn contracts, and between them they do great things. Now, this conjunction is the start of a new business cycle. Also, looking at the big grand trine in the supply houses in the earth signs, wow. So I would expect there to be some amazing technological advances in the next 20 years. I mean, really amazing ones. Yay, huh? The 4th house. This is the one that kind of I spent a lot of time thinking about. And I listed some things I thought might manifest. And there's a bunch of them. I don't know which one it's going to be. Only God knows it. Again, like I said, just be a little prepared. Neptune dissolves anything it touches. Are people just feeling deceived? That could be it. It could just be people feeling deceived. It could be people turning to religion in this period. It could be the COVID resurfacing. It could be, water. It could be crop failures. It could be blights, right? Neptune conjunct the moon. Maybe it's so wet it causes a blight of some of the winter crops. I don't know, but it doesn't look, great. Just be ready. Okay. The fifth house. Oh my goodness. Of course, the fifth house is one of the sexual houses, the other being the eighth house. It rules children, risk-taking of all kinds. It is a natural ruler of leadership. The fifth house is the Leo's house, so the natural ruler of important people, the kings, you know. And that is in a very tight square with Pluto in Capricorn. Now, you could just look at that and say, Pluto in Capricorn, powerful, potentially corrupt leaders. And people are going to be, you know, really angry, feeling murderous rage. Does this mean scandals, Pluto ruling the 12th, are going to be relating to sex and children and probably money because Pluto sits in the second house. Now, it's in Capricorn, which means they will be held accountable. Does this mean... You will notice Pluto is ruled by Saturn, and Saturn is conjunct Jupiter, which is the start of a cycle. Does this mean this is a cleaning out of a lot of the corruption that we all kind of knew was happening in Washington, at least suspected? You know, I mean, how do these politicians get so darn wealthy, you know, on a politician's salary? I mean, they are mega millionaires. How do they do that? I think we all know they're doing stuff. I just don't think, at least me, I didn't know how they were doing it. I mean, I suspected they were, but I didn't know how. But I think some of this stuff is going to be exposed, and it will begin a new cycle in the United States. And hopefully a lot of this corruption will be worked out of the system. And I think that's what's really set the United States apart from some of the other countries is, you know, we don't tolerate corruption, where that is a way of life in a lot of countries. So once we lose that, I think the United States would be in a lot of trouble. That is a very violent aspect. It's murderous rage. I think people are going to want to ride these guys out on a rail, you know, tar and feather them like the old days and ride them out on a rail. I mean, these people... Power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. These people probably felt entitled, like they could do anything they wanted. They were so powerful and so wealthy and so protected that I think anything went. And I think they're about to be held accountable. And I, for one, am happy about it. Okay? Now, we guys got to remember that power isn't bad in and of itself, and just like money isn't bad in and of itself. It's misuse of power that is bad. There are people, powerful people, who use their power for good. So to come out against, you know, all powerful people, I don't think is realistic. If they're bad, they need to be exposed and, you know, ta-ta. Sixth house, the working man or the common man. Now, this is a really big house in a mundane reading because, you know, if the common man is doing well, if the common man has a job, if the common man can pay his bills, things are pretty okay in that country. If the common man is out of work, if the common man can't pay his bills, that's when unrest starts. That's when, you know, riots, rebellion starts. But look at that Uranus in a big, grand trine. Now, it's not without bad aspect there. It is also squaring Jupiter and Saturn, okay? And it is retrograde, so it's not in perfect shape, but it's in good enough shape that I think that things are going to be okay. I think people might feel like, you know, maybe jobs are coming back, like I said, potentially in a big way. To me, it could also mean big reorganizations, big revamping of our medical. The sixth house is one of the houses of health. Revamping our healthcare system, which is in such dire need. And if one thing the COVID taught me is, wow, do we really need to revamp our medical? This is just crazy. I have wondered for a long time where all this money is going. Where does that $500 for a box of Kleenex go? You know, I don't know. But anyway, I do. It looks to me like there will be revamping of the medical system. Seventh house. Yikes. Seventh house is a house of war, treaties, diplomacy, trade dealers, open enemies, attorneys. And it is conjunct the malefic called Pleiades, which is the weeping sisters, and it means in an astrology reading something to weep about. So we are weeping probably about the legal stuff going on. We may be weeping about a foreign war. Venus in Sagittarius. Sagittarius rules the natural ruler of the ninth house of foreign things, and you'll notice the moon is conjunct Neptune. That's sorrow. Now, in our modern day, we get to watch everything in our living rooms. All the war, all the blow up, all the torn up buildings. It's just right in our living rooms. We get to watch it. So, and it's awful to watch, but I do not see us getting involved in a war during this period. I think we're going to have enough fish to fry here internally. And traditionally, the United States has been slow about entering wars, but I do believe there will be a war in Asia during this period. And maybe that's what it means. Maybe it means we're going to watch and we're going to be like, oh, this is awful, just awful. Okay. Now, the 8th house, which rules our treasury, our debt, our accumulated wealth. Notice Mercury is combust. Have we burned up our wealth? Maybe a stimulus comes out that really drains the treasury, or maybe it means a revamp of the banking system. Now, lots of people have said the Federal Reserve is bad news and corrupt. Maybe this signals a revamp. I mean, Trump doesn't seem to care what anybody thinks. I would not be at all surprised if he just blew that all up. Moving on to the 9th house. Leo is intercepted here. Now, this says to me we may be closing our borders. Maybe Trump is like really working on immigration, really closing our borders, really tightening them up. If there is an Asian war, of course, refugees are going to flood out. Say Taiwan gets taken over by China. There will be tons of refugees. And it looks like we will close our borders to them. Now, that may be something we're confused about because the moon rules the 9th house. On one hand, we want to protect our workers after a pandemic and we have high unemployment. On the other hand, we feel so bad and sorry for those people. Now, that decision is above my pay grade. I don't know. But it looks like the borders may be closed, okay? It could mean a lot of things like foreign trade deals. Maybe we're closing ourselves off and becoming less of a global economy. The 10th house. It looks like by now we will have ironed out our leadership issues by about Christmas or so. And it looks to be a favorable economically. Again, I've come out and said I think Trump will win. After some cost and monkeying around, I do think Trump will win. And of course, he was responsible for the largest economy prior. So if he gets reelected, of course, the stock market's going to go, yay, here comes the booming economy. It does look favorable for the economy. So whoever is our leader, it could be Biden. I am wrong sometimes. Whatever it is, it looks to be good for the country. So take solace in that. If you're a Biden supporter or a Dem supporter, it looks like or a Republican, whoever is elected looks to be wonderful for our country financially. So just take solace in that, whichever side of that fence you're on. Now, whoever is the leader looks to me to have at least lost one of the houses. Maybe the Senate, maybe the Congress, I don't know, but it looks like they will be giving the president issues. Maybe it just turns out tight because the ruler of the 11th house, Venus, is in the liberal sign of Sag. So maybe they will flip the Senate. And notice how Venus squares the midheaven. They will be giving who's ever president issues. Now, whether it's Biden and the House and Senate turn red, I don't know, but it looks like the legislature will be giving the president issues. Okay, squares mean difficulties, delays, hardships, problems. I do think this chart supports Trump winning. Why? Because Jupiter, planet of liberals, is in the Saturn-ruled sign of Aquarius. Remember, Aquarius was ruled by Saturn until Uranus was discovered just recently. So he's considered the secondary ruler of Aquarius. So I do think the president will be reelected. But I do think the legislature will continue to give him trouble. Maybe that's all it means. Maybe they just are, liberals are just going to give him trouble, like they've been, So it could mean that too. 12th house, scandals. Oh dear. I think we're in for some terrible scandals that is going to incite some very angry people, potentially rightfully so. If the stuff they are hinting at that is on Biden's laptop, then I would say the United States has every reason to be very angry. As an American, I am kind of blown away at the level of corruption that we're seeing. People are saying, oh, this has always been going on. And maybe that's true. Maybe it's just the internet that has made it much more visible to us. But I am kind of floored. Where is the Epstein stuff? I mean, that has been slow walk for a decade. Remember back Acosta was told to stand down because the FBI had this, and that a decade later, we are still waiting. Ghislaine Maxwell, finally, we can see her transcripts, and the Virgin Islands requested the flight logs, but I haven't seen any of that. I mean, this stuff just gets slow walked. It looks like our Department of Justice in the United States is corrupt. I mean, there's just nothing, no denying it. All these things seem to disappear into the Department of Justice. Now, as an astrologer, we know everything has a birth chart, not just people, but organizations. And the FBI has a history of corruption. Remember J. Edgar Hoover and all the corruption scandals around there? Here we are back again with a corrupt, and I don't believe it's the FBI agents. It looks like the leadership. So, eventful period, batten down the hatches, 3 planets, plus the sun at 0 degrees, of course. Wow. So, our leadership will be ironed out. Looks like the start of a hugely positive financial period for the United States. I believe there will be a foreign war. I believe there will be terrible corruption of powerful people exposed. I would love to believe from this chart that Epstein and I'm just using him as an example because there are many powerful corrupt people, and you notice I am being bipartisan by not mentioning people on both sides of the aisle. As far as I'm concerned, if they're Republican or Democrat and they're corrupt, they should be held accountable, right? I don't care, what they, what face they put on themselves. If they're corrupt, bye-bye. But I believe we will see people held accountable during this period. I believe there is the potential for an internet outage during this period, or potentially the tech giant to be held accountable, potentially broken up, monopoly charges, things like that. I don't know. Section 230, they talk about Section 230 being repealed, or if you are in violation of Section 230, you can be sued or whatever. I don't know what's going to happen, but it looks like a reorganization there. And I believe this will be the start of a huge technological period for the United States. Expect some really great technology to be invented during the next 20-year period. Uranus is about the revolution. Is there going to be a huge technological revolution? Maybe we go set up moon bases and Mars bases, and during this 20-year period, I can think of some great things that could happen. Wow, from dark times, the phoenix rising from the ashes, we will come back and we will be okay. I believe we will be okay. So anyway, guys, that's what I see for winter 2020 for the United States. I hope if you enjoy these readings, you'll like, share, and subscribe, and thank you for listening.